What's going on, guys? PepperBelly here, bringing you some Far Cry 3 gameplay. While I talk about the game, I was going to do a review, but I figured I might as well not because there's already 1,000 reviews out there that pretty much get the point across very well. It's incredibly immersive, it's an amazing game, you should definitely play it. If you guys are still sitting on the fence about this game, you should really consider somehow obtaining it and playing it, because this game was honestly my favorite game of the year so far. It's a great contender for the game of the year, and to me personally, I think it could be the game of the year for me because I just had so much pleasure playing it. The in-depth narrative, the story, the characters, the voice acting, everything about it. Michael Mando as Voss was like superb, incredible. Everything about the game was just absolutely amazing. The exploration, the islands. The AI is not really quite up to standard because the AI can be finicky at times, and there were a few glitches like vibrating characters where they're like warping back and forth, especially when they're sitting down, and some odd things and graphical glitches and artifacting and whatnot. But the game, it didn't break my immersion whatsoever, all those problems. It was still absolutely 100% probably the best game I played in a long time. I actually lost myself in the world. And what I mean by that is, like, I got so immersed, I kind of lost sight of reality for a little bit. The way your character progresses, the way everything is paced, it's so excellent. And I've actually would start gaming. I remember one night I actually started a gaming session around 6 p.m. and I played the game a little bit earlier before, and next thing I knew, I was playing it, enjoying it, just completely gone, like consumed by this game, sucked into the world and everything, actually feeling everything going on around me. And next thing I look at the time, it's like 4 in the morning, and that just went by like that. I didn't feel it whatsoever. I didn't even know what happened. I was just like, holy shit, it just went into the future somehow, because like it just, that time was just gone in seconds. It was like, it was just great. Well, it felt like seconds. It was obviously hours. But the game, no game has done that to me since Mass Effect 1 and maybe Mass Effect 2. I haven't actually been so immersed into a game where I just had to kind of like just really want to play it. Like I thought about it every day. I actually loved waking up really early in the morning just to play it, and that's also by staying up really late with a gaming session from the same game. I would like dream about it. It was so good, really well done. A lot of people don't like it. I personally do. I actually really enjoyed Far Cry 2, so the transition was like just a huge milestone to achieve compared to Far Cry 2, because I really loved Far Cry 2. I know a lot of people didn't like it, and because I loved that, Far Cry 3 was a huge improvement already on what was, to me, it was great, and it just really just skyrocketed my expectations for the game. It was completely amazing, the experience, everything about it. The multiplayer, I played a little bit of it. It's not too bad. It's not the greatest multiplayer ever. Don't expect something fantastic from it. It's still pretty fun though, and it's kind of interesting the way you got the tattoos that you can, or tattoos, that you can actually customize your character in the map editor. The map editor I haven't actually played around with yet, but hopefully it's up to standard with the previous Far Cry games. And unfortunately, I haven't gotten around to playing co-op yet. Co-op to me seems like a really neat thing in this game. Of course, it's not to the standard of that of single player, where you can just go free roaming with your buddies and just do anything you want on the island, kind of like Grand Theft Auto style, except with missions and stuff. They actually have a completely separate co-op campaign dedicated to Far Cry 3. So it's not even like, or dedicated just to co-op. It's not even like Halo 4. Like, I remember Halo 4, they were promising like, oh, a super awesome, amazing live action trailers and episodic content and like just amazing missions and whatever. And it just turned out it was like recycling the same goddamn maps every fucking time. And the cinematics were pretty much the only amazing part about it. Everything else was pretty lame. The co-op is fun, don't get me wrong, but just the recycle, it wasn't what I was expecting. It wasn't what they made me believe it was. Far Cry 3 is pretty much what they kind of promised. It's actually a completely separate thing from the single player, but it's actually a campaign designed for co-op. So it's not like a really cheap, oh, we're gonna go on multiplayer maps like Horde style and just kill things with a story element in the background. No, there actually is story progression and missions throughout the entire co-op, which seems really interesting, seems really good to me, and I think they did a fantastic job presenting it in such a way. Now, the game is pretty horribly optimized. It's not quite up to the standard of PC gaming. A lot of people with amazing graphics cards were experiencing a lot of frame rate issues and just things like that. I've experienced frame rate issues as well. You probably could see it in the gameplay. I'm not entirely sure if it's noticeable, but it was there. It wasn't the greatest. Usually I would be playing around 60 frames per second, but then occasionally it would drop to like 40 or 30-ish. I think 30 would be the lowest I've ever had, but as you may know, some games perform different at different frame rates. Some games 30 frames per second is really smooth because the game is just optimized for it, or the game is just really well designed to have a nice smooth transition from frames as they increase or decrease, which is really noticeable, to be honest, because some games you'll be playing at 60 frames per second and you play at 30 frames per second. Sometimes 30 is just like, what the fuck, this feels like 10. It feels like you're playing at 10 frames per second, but in reality the game is actually putting out 30, where some games you're playing at 30 and it feels like buttery smooth gameplay, and it really depends. This game doesn't have it quite as smooth. There's a lot of stuttering issues, there's a lot of weird things about it that just aren't that great. But other than that, the game is still fantastic. Update your drivers to the latest drivers by NVIDIA or ATI, and you're probably going to have a better experience. The game performed better and generally was a lot more fun to play. It was pretty great in general. Now, the game's graphics aren't really quite up to par with people expect, especially for a PC game, which you can really tell that it's kind of ported from a console because there is some consolitis somewhere in the game. You'll feel it, but it's not going to be game-breaking. It's probably still one of the best console ports to this day where it's been brought over from the console. It's pretty good in general, actually, but the graphics, like I said, just aren't up to standard. It's not the crisis of the next generation, which is what I think a lot of people were kind of hoping for on the PC side. They were kind of hoping, especially me, I was really hoping for another groundbreakingly intensive graphic game where, like, the current hardware would have trouble running the game, kind of like what Crysis did back in 2007. Crysis still looks pretty much slightly better in some aspects than Far Cry 3, which is kind of a shame when you really think about it, because there's no excuse. Far Cry 3 should have really pushed that boundary, at least for the PC, and since they have DirectX 11 support, they really should have utilized it and optimized the game so it would actually run smoothly for a lot of people, because a lot of people have been going into the files and like tweaking it and doing all these kind of things with NVIDIA Inspector and ATI equivalent of such programs, and they would actually go crazy trying to make the game run properly. And some of them succeed and a lot of people haven't. Some people, the game crashes all the time. And there's a lot of issues that they really need to address, because this game is probably one of the most excellent games I've ever played. But these issues are what's making it unplayable for some people, and it's just really taking them out of the experience. It's really turning them off from the game, which is a damn shame, because this game is something that hasn't really been accomplished in a long fucking time. It's a completely new, refreshing breath of fresh air, which is just absolutely amazing. I can't even stress that enough. I really, really love this game. I'm on my second playthrough now. I played it on the hardest difficulty, which was pretty easy in general, which you'll hear me a little bit later in this video. I'm going to be talking about some future content for the game, or possibly future Far Cry games, which I'm going to be talking about difficulty-wise, which I'll get into later in this video. Now, there are some RPG elements in this game that relate to the tataus, which are tattoos if you want to go a little bit more English, normal people term. It's a tattoo of the warrior. That's the way they go about explaining it in the game. So you're kind of like a symbol. Ooh, I got the warrior tattoo, so I'm designed for like whatever's going on here and like the life of the warrior and the tribes and all that stuff. And the way you level up your character, it'll actually show on your arm. Your tattoo will slowly grow. So it'll actually, like, more of your tattoo will be added to your arm as you slowly add more abilities to your character. Now, one thing I really just didn't like that much about the whole RPG elements in the game is that they actually make it so you can unlock every single ability by the end of the game. To me, that's ridiculous. I don't know why they would do that. Kind of takes away the diversity to me. I don't see myself having as much replayability knowing that I can just automatically max out my character by the end of the game. There's really nothing different there. It'd be awesome to be able to actually have 3 different trees, like traditional RPGs, like World of Warcraft or other things, Fallout or Skyrim, stuff like that, where you actually have to specifically put traits and your skill points and experience into upgrading a specific tree. So either way, you can have one full-out spec for stealth, or one full-out spec for assault, or half and half, or kind of like a mix between the 3, but always having the one that's dominant. That way, your character will always play differently in your playthroughs, which would definitely add to diversity in the game to me. It would add a lot more replayability knowing that you can play the game being fully stealth, or play the game going fully assault, or fully herbalist and like tactical and whatever the options are. It'd be a lot more interesting than just being able to max out your character, become a fucking god, which is kind of like, although that is kind of the premise of the game, that your character slowly progresses from being a huge pussy to becoming a crazy killer warrior, which I guess does make sense in the aspect that as you're progressing and the characters you meet, they're kind of trying to make you become a crazy warrior, which makes sense because I guess unlocking all those abilities and becoming like all powerful, all amazing huntsman of the whatever in the jungle, killing everything and being like an ultimate warrior, which kind of makes sense, but still it would have been nice to actually have diversity between the RPG elements and the skill trees that you actually go into specifically. Now there are a lot of things from Far Cry 2 that I also miss that should have been, definitely should have been in this game. Now, a lot of people agree with this. This is one thing I don't know why, I don't know what in their right mind they were thinking why they would take this away, as it was one of the awesome immersive aspects of Far Cry 2 was having the in-game map. Being able to actually physically take out a map and a compass and navigate the world in such a way. That was really cool. Trading it for some like full screen pausing the game map just completely ruins the immersion, kind of just takes away everything from it, and makes driving to locations a complete pain in the ass. Where, and back in Far Cry 2, you want to go to a location and you don't actually have on your mini map or anything, you don't actually have a path drawn out highlighting the roads where you should go. It would be very convenient just to pull out a map and look at it while you're driving to locate where you are and where you're going, which was a lot easier than having to pause the game, look at the maps, memorize the roads, go back into the game, drive it, oh shit, I made a wrong turn, look at the map, rinse and repeat until you finally get to your location. It's not really as difficult as I'm making it sound, it's just it was a lot easier and a lot more immersive and fluent than game breaking by pausing to look at the map all the time, which was a little bit difficult, especially how this game is going for a kind of immersive element, which they do very well, but there's just some things they could have done that would have been a lot better. Another thing from Far Cry 2 I do miss is being able to actually wound enemies. That was one of the bigger trademarks in Far Cry 2, was actually being able to fire at an opponent's leg with a sniper rifle, and he would drop over and being severely wounded and just completely in pain, and then he'd be calling out for help, and his teammates or any enemy nearby would go and assist him. They would actually go to him, pick him up, and try to give him first aid and drag him off somewhere safe. And you can use that as bait. You can fire and wound or fire at somebody, wound them, bait in a whole bunch of guys to help them out, and then you slaughter them all, shooting them, killing them both, which is a lot cooler than what the game offers now. Now it's pretty much just like you have to headshot everybody, you have to just drop everyone. There really is diversity there with being able to actually be tactical and using certain elements like that in the game anymore. It does not exist. It's more like you gotta go in there and just pretty much kill shit first time through, which kind of sucks, because wounding people was a lot more fun, especially when you're a sniper. It just opens up a whole new door of being able to do things. Now when you snipe somebody, they fall over, they die, their teammates just end up looking around all over the place for you, instead of actually coming after you, trying to kill you, or trying to help their teammates or whatever. They're kind of just lost, trying to find you, and walking around pretty much the same area, trying to figure out what caused their buddy to get killed. Continuing, one of the things I missed from Far Cry 2 would be the realistic first aid animations. Now, they have had a lot in Far Cry 2. In this game, they seem to have just like 4 or 5. One where you take a bullet out of your freaking arm, one where you pretty much wrap a scratch on your arm, and relocating your hand or thumb or finger. That pretty much is all they have in Far Cry 3, which really sucks, because in Far Cry 2 there was a lot of diversity there. There's a lot of like, oh, okay, I jumped off a cliff, I fell quite a distance, I hurt myself. Well, let me relocate my foot, like, put it back in its place. Or I jumped off a building and landed in like a pile of girders, and suddenly I have like a piece of, like, a bar sticking through my chest, I gotta rip it out. Stuff like that. There's a lot of more realistic animations for first aid. A little bit unethical, because you wouldn't probably do that. I doubt anyone would really stick a knife in their freaking arm, pulling out, like, you know, a fucking bullet or something. That'd be kind of ridiculously painful. But it did bring more of that kind of authentic feeling that I'm in the middle of nowhere, I'm on my own, I have no medical doctors, no surgeons or anything. I have to kind of resort to drastic measures to heal myself, and it worked. And it would have been nice to see that in Far Cry 3 as well, a lot more of that, instead of just like the same animation over and over and over again, which got really repetitive and just kind of like boring and dull. And it wasn't like, oh my god. I remember back in Far Cry 2, I'd kind of be like, holy shit, he just did that. Like, you know, you kind of get like shaky and oozy seeing him like rip a bullet out of his arm, or just do first aid on himself, like ripping things out of him with like pliers and knives and stuff, which was quite entertaining to see. Now, I'm going to wrap things up at the end of this video with the major topic, which I'm really focusing on, which is kind of the thing that I really want in this game, and that's like a survival mode of difficulty more difficult than hard. I would love to see that, and I'm going to get into it because I have a lot of things I want to talk about. I've actually written them down. Pretty much things that I want to get more in depth with that can enhance and make the experience a lot more long-lasting and a lot more memorable and a lot more intense and a lot more immersive. So let me get into it. First things first, one thing I wish they would remove, or have the ability to remove the HUD. I don't know why they're forcing a HUD on you. It kind of is annoying. And being able to actually remove the HUD, kind of similar to Far Cry 2, would be nice. And with the addition of the in-game map that somehow can probably be modded in or by like the community, or maybe added by Ubisoft down the road as they do more content updates and stuff. Hopefully they can do that, which would also benefit having the no HUD aspect, because then you can just whip out your map and plot courses and stuff, which would be a lot more interesting for navigational purposes, stuff like that, which would make the immersion and make it feel more authentic, and more survivalist. It would make it a lot more difficult to actually just know where you're going, and it'll immerse you easier in the world because there's nothing on your screen. It actually changes the game. There's a lot of people right now that actually tweak the files to remove the HUD, and a lot of people said that it actually makes the game feel a lot better, and it makes it feel like you're playing a completely different game, which some people have actually said that that's what it does, and it makes it a lot more fun, a lot more interesting, a lot more exciting. Another thing is obviously more realistic AI. I would love to see AI that is actually smart. Now, pirates, I can understand that probably aren't geniuses when it comes to, I don't know, tactics and stuff, but when you get later on in the game, you start to encounter newer enemies that are obviously more trained, and it would be nice to actually see them, which they are, to some extent, more smart about doing their objectives, or about attacking and strategy and tactics, but it would be nice to see them, like, actually really smart. So when you take a guy out and see a guy drop, then they'll know that, okay, someone obviously got shot or sniped. Let's fucking obviously take cover, not stand in the open looking for him back and forth like some of the enemies do, which is kind of ridiculous. Actually have a realistic reaction to a lot of the things that actually go on. No more fast travel. That's one thing a lot of people may disagree with, but I personally would think that would make the game a lot better. It would force you to travel and explore the island, which really would be more incentive to exploring, is that you don't have fast travel. No, none of this, like, I can go across the map and back in like seconds, cheaping out on everything in between. That could have been exciting, that could have happened. Actually make it so you physically have to go everywhere manually. That would make the game a lot more realistic, a lot more time consuming, which is technically what you're trying to go for with this style of difficulty. You want to make the game last longer and a lot more intense than just simply being able to double click, or if you're on Xbox or PS3, just press a button to fast travel somewhere, which is kind of ridiculous. No more health injectors, or if they have health injectors, make it so you can't just craft them in the field. So this would work fantastic if they had the Far Cry 2 animations back, where you had a lot more diversity in the animations for being wounded and performing first aid on yourself. It would make it a lot more intense and a lot more realistic, actually having to physically get behind cover and actually perform first aid on yourself, instead of just like popping an injection in you and you're good to go in a matter of seconds, which is a little bit ridiculous, a little bit unrealistic, and just doesn't really put me. It's good for whenever you're kind of like in an oh shit moment, I really need to heal myself, but obviously want to die if I had to perform the full animation. But if you want to go for this higher difficulty, it's there. That's the point of it, is to actually make it a lot more intense. It'd be a lot more like Fallout New Vegas, where the survival element of the game would just be a lot more difficult, a lot more insane. Obviously, you don't have to eat or sleep, but stuff like that. Just some of these things can just really enhance the experience. And no health injections, or if you have them, you have to craft them at specific locations, at outposts and such, so you can't just like cut them and then form them in the field. That way, you can actually have more incentive to travel once again. Now, resupplying only works at outposts, and I'm not talking about like picking up ammo off of dead bodies. I'm talking about the randomly placed ammo stashes that are clearly there for action-packed scenarios throughout the campaign. Completely get rid of that shit. I want to have it so it's actually like realistic, where you have to scavenge for things. You have to try to survive by looking for things and trying to bend them to your will, I guess. Try to make it so you can live, you can push through whatever's happening, make it more dynamic, more intense, and make it so you actually have to literally upgrade your character to the point where you can have a lot more ammo carried on you and a lot more realistic ways of obtaining it. So you have to actually go and acquire ammo, purchase it, do stuff like that, instead of just going and oh, I found like this nice, perfectly conveniently placed body armor right next to a whole bunch of ammo, which is a little bit ridiculous. It kind of takes you out of the immersion, but it is kind of nice in the game how you can pick up the ammo. But I'm talking, of course, of a survival mode, a more difficult mode that would be for the more hardcore that would love to actually play this game, which would be much better for a lot of people, especially me. This is one of the rarer games that I actually prefer to have a more difficult experience. When I start a new game in RPGs, I tend to like going with the New Game Plus because I like to slaughter shit and plow my way through everything like I'm an all-powerful being. This is different. In Far Cry, I want to feel completely vulnerable. I want to be almost knowing that I can die by the simplest mistake. The simplest mistake. Just going and completely screwing something up and then I'm completely dead. The actual necessity to run away from fights. Because in real life, you wouldn't always stick around to fight back. In some situations, it's just too much to handle and you would actually get the fuck out of there. And it would be nice to actually be able to have that where you feel that sense of vulnerability where like, this is not going to work out. I have to run as far away as I can. They'll chase you and pursue you, kind of like the beginning of the way Far Cry 3 unfolds, and just make it so you have to actually escape certain situations that are just clearly too much for you to handle at the current moment. And the last thing I have on my list is pretty much the RPG elements. So instead of having it, take them away or something in the survival mode. Make them so they're less effective. Lower them, essentially. Don't make it so like, oh, I take 50% less damage. Make it like 2 or 3 or 5% max. Make it so you're still realistically human by the end of things, where jumping off of 20 feet can hurt yourself or something. Or make it more realistic in that you have to really pace yourself and make sure you know exactly what you're doing before you do them. And make it so like you're just not an all-powerful being. You're still human. Taking a bullet can drop you in a second, stuff like that, where you actually have to really be mindful about how you go about doing things, because it'll make it a lot more tactical, a lot more intense, and a lot more immersive, just knowing that you're actually vulnerable, which is a huge thing to me. So alter the RPG additions that they have right now, so the skills and stuff that you can acquire, just don't get rid of them completely, just make them so they're not as powerful as they are, so you're not going to be super intensely amazing. So that pretty much sums up everything I want to talk about for this game. It was a long video, 20 minutes long, 22 minutes and 5 seconds. If you guys sat through it this entire time, you guys are awesome. I appreciate it. Hopefully you guys can leave some comments and let me know what you think, because this game is kind of controversial right now. There's a lot of conversation going on about it. I personally loved it. It's great, but I would love to actually experience a more difficult, more intense, immersive game. In reality, the whole survival thing, the whole survival mode, the hardcorest mode you can possibly get, it would be nice to actually have toggleable features, so obviously not forced into these things. So you can turn off the whole I can't craft in the field, or you can turn off the no HUD or stuff like that. Actually have it so you can tweak it to your liking, but then have like an ultimate hardcore mode where you're forced with all these crazy things that you absolutely have to abide by, which would make the experience a lot better to me. And I would love to actually be able to sit down with this game and play it for like a month straight, because that's how long it would actually take you to beat it, which would be great. But because having these things would actually extend the game's life by making it a lot more harder to progress through the game, because you have to travel everywhere manually. Everything's a lot more difficult. I would love to sit down for 30 days playing this game, kind of like I'm on some crazy, kind of like it actually is happening in my life right now at this moment. Like I got lost on this island for a month and I'm actually having to physically maneuver and move around the world and try to survive and get my friends back with this unknowing obligation that I have to do so. And it would be absolutely wonderful. And I really hope that they can do something with this with either future Far Cry games or with content updates for the game. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please remember to rate the video, comment the video, and subscribe if you want to see more in the future. Take care, guys.
Holy crap! Motherfucker! He's behind cover!